So how are you doing today?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fun, exciting day.
Nice. Fridays are always good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was great to watch you today. Thanks for
Mhm.
letting me come in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with a question that's pretty simplistic. What do you feel like went really well today?
I think for the most part, they're starting to get down now, like when they come to the table, like what they're supposed to do. It's still so new to us, so like I'll try to remind them, but like most of the time, like my groups, they'll just come in and just like start grabbing stuff that they need. So I think for that, they understand it, and I think the groups that I have set, they work really well together for the most part, except for one, but yeah, they work really well together too.
So you feel like the rules and the routines are really coming into place?
Yeah, I think it was just mostly because like at first I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, so I was like, okay, well I know that we should, like the basics of what we've been doing, so like we were pretty much just practicing that first. So I think they're starting to get that down.
That's great. So not only are the students' expectations getting
Mhm.
higher, your expectations are getting higher.
Mhm.
So that's going to grow together.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. If I were to say, what's something you could tweak about your lesson today?
I think one of the things that I tried with one of my groups was a little out of their realm, I guess. I thought that they would be ready for it because it was just like come up with one simple question. But I think if I were to do it over, when I go back with them, I'm just gonna start looking at like W questions, like what, why, like how can you start a question, or like H for how and stuff like that, and right away not just ask them to produce a question, because I think they were just like, well, at least one of them in the group was just like thrown off by it completely. So I think, I guess, taking a step back and kind of front load first, because I thought that they would be ready for it, but they weren't. Just because it was, the activity itself was after level, it was like an E or an F, but I guess they weren't ready for it, so.
So knowing that they weren't ready for that rigorous of an activity,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the ways that you think maybe you could have scaffolded that activity for them?
I think like presenting them, well, the day before I went over like different questions we could ask, but I guess having them in front of them, and I know that we have those cards that we could use too that have the types of questions we ask with like the why and how and what, and put them in front of them so they can actually see how they would start it, and then how to use their book to find a question that can be answered in the book before they even write down a question. Just kind of just talk about it first, and then maybe set up some sentence frames for them to just kind of plug into.
Perfect. So just
Yeah.
setting up some outliers to be able to scaffold them to be
Mhm.
able to reach that conversation, like Jen
Yeah.
Richardson cards, your red and green cards, things
Mhm.
like that. Even having them stop, think, and paraphrase.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea. So looking at what you have now,
Mhm.
and you said you thought that your groups were pretty fluid
Mhm.
and they worked well together with the exception of one. Could you elaborate on that?
I think it's just because for the group that doesn't work very well, I mean, they work fine together for the most part. It's just like sometimes it's a disconnect because one of them is an English language learner and then one is SPED, so it's kind of like at the same time there's still so many differences between them. So I'm trying to like, they read at the same level but they have like so many different needs, so I'm trying to like find like a balance for them. But the other groups, I think they work really well together because they know what is expected of them, and they're like really excited about that, I think. So they like get excited to work with people that are like, okay, like you get what I'm saying, like I don't have to help you kind of thing. Because usually when they're in their groups, they're all like in different levels, and so I think they, not that they're irritated by it, but they know that their job is to help each other. And I think when they're in those guided reading groups, they're really excited that they just get to like go with it, and they don't have to like stop and be like, are you done? Can I, like, kind of thing. So I think that they recognize that now.
So when they're out in the classroom, they're heterogeneous.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're at their table, they're homogeneous.
Yeah.
And the group that you're referring to is the group of two that I saw you in?
Yeah.
So if you were to continue with this group, having a SPED student and an EL student,
Mm-hmm.
what differences are you seeing in their needs?
I'm noticing, I mean, for the EL at least, like, I think it's just like coming across words that don't follow like the same rules. So like some of the sight words and things like that, like the patterns of like TH, I have to spend more time with him on to like explain that sometimes it just doesn't work. And then the other student is just like fine with those kind of things. But and so I think also part of it is that I just assume that they have all this like background knowledge of like what a hawk is or a chipmunk, but I have this student that's from Germany that's like, I've never seen that in my life before, because I'll be like, okay, like where is the hawk in the story, and he's like you know, like looking around, like I have no idea. So I think like that is a big part of it too, where the other student like has seen all these things before, so she's like, it's an insect, and like will point at it, and he's like, that's not what we call them. Like, I don't know, you know? So I think that's something I'll have to work out and get some picture cards for him and kind of go through those too.
So vocabulary, this is what I'm seeing from you, is it's more of a vocabulary understanding, and one has more of a decoding understanding. And so being able to actually read the words versus being able to know what the word means.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So knowing those two things, there's so many ways that you could make that guided reading group. They would just perform different activities. Yeah, I like that.
Well, I always thought that, because I always thought when they're in those guided reading things, they should be doing the same thing. But so that's why I was like, I don't know how to reach both of them at the same time. So I guess that makes sense now. Because I was like, I don't know, you know.
Thinking about it, if it's only 2 students, do you think it's a viable solution to be able to have 2 different activities going on to meet their needs?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I mean, that's up to you. They can be, but they don't have to be. So that's up to you. What did you notice when the students had the cards in the beginning? Can you elaborate on what that particular group was doing with those cards?
Yeah. It's something new that we're still trying and figuring out if it's something that I don't know, that works for us, but they're just sight words. So I told them that each time I'll just set them out while we get ready. They can go through them, and when they go through them, they pass them to the next person. What I started to notice about this, which I'm trying to figure out like how I'm gonna, if I even want to keep doing them, is that they'll try to like whisper them and then like move them along fast, and I could hear them, or I'll try to like watch their mouths, but then at the same time I'm trying to get stuff ready. So I'm like, they could be doing those sight words and they could be saying them completely wrong and then just passing them, and I'm like wait a minute, like how do you say that? I mean, at least with one of the students, she was like at least honest with it. She would look at me and be like, don't know, kind of thing. But I think there were some that they just wanted to slide along. So I think that's something I'll have to, if I want them to do it more of like where they're actually saying them out loud to each other, maybe, kind of thing, and I can hear them saying them to each other. So I'll have to kind of adjust that probably.
So instead of passing them over, just have them say the word and then say the word to the other person. I like that. It's a little bit more of that collaboration piece as well. I'm going to move on to the next group. So the next group you had a lot of activities in that guided reading section, which is amazing. It was awesome. And I could tell that it was a continuation from before, because they had their own bags and they had their own cards. I didn't understand what those index cards were for in those bags.
Okay. So with the previous group, though, they would just write down cards if they didn't know how to say the word. And then with this group, it's a little bit higher. So I would tell them to write down a word that they came across that they didn't know. And that if, after they were done reading, and they would read it a few times, if they caught on to what the word actually meant, or they found it in the glossary at some point, then they would flip it over and write the definition on it. And it was kind of like their vocab like cards. So it was like, it's kind of like your own little study card, and you're creating your own flashcards. I think since it's so new, some of them, they're just so excited because they get to use a Sharpie. So they're literally just writing every single word down, and I'm like, that says Asia, it's a continent, like you don't need to find the definition. But like, so I think they were really excited about just like making them, but they're starting to get it down. So when we sit down, they're supposed to go through their cards, and then the ones that they still haven't figured out, I'll ask them to look through and see if they can use context clues to find it.
So that's their word work prior to the actual activity.
Yeah.
So at the end of the week,
Mm-hmm.
and you're done with the book, do the kids take the cards or?
Yeah, this was the first week we tried it, so I'm kind of wanting to keep working with the books that they have because it was like a hectic week, so we didn't get to like finish it through. But I was kind of thinking that they would take the cards out and then those are theirs to keep. And then each week, every time we get a new book, we'll start over with our new cards.
Okay. There's so much you could do with that idea because I love the fact that they're making their own, you know, maybe even making their own dictionaries or, you know, something like that. And they'd have to put them in alphabetical order and then they can keep adding to their dictionaries.
That'd be cool.
Just the creation of something that something to cement what they've learned in that guided reading session, you know, is really important. One thing I noticed when I was in your room is you have a really calm demeanor with your kids, and that's super important to have. And so when the kids were reading, I wasn't really able to hear them read, but I noticed that you were taking notes. Can you explain that to me?
When I first sit down, like, I have a sheet with all their names on it, and then it has a box for all the dates. So I'll just write down the day that I meet with them, the activity that they're doing, and then on the side I keep notes. So, like, if I notice, like, there's a student that's, like, not reading, I guess, like, if they're struggling with some of, like, multi-syllabic words or something, I'll write that down. Or if I notice they're, like, completely ignoring question marks and exclamation marks, I'll write that down. Or if they're not, I'll write that down so that I know that that's something I don't have to, like, stress with them all the time. So far, those are the types of things, I guess, I've been just, like, taking notes on for the most part. Or if, like, I notice, like, maybe the student's not reading at the same level as the others, I might make a note to myself, because then if it's just, like, that week it was just a book that was just weird for them, so then I could keep track. Like, if the next week it's a new book and they're reading just fine, like, it might change things for me, for them, too.
So using anecdotal notes is fantastic. How do you use that to infuse into your next steps?
Oh, okay. Haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Just started the notes.
It's fine.
No, I just started the notes, but I guess from, like, those are the main things that I've been noticing, that they'll completely, like, avoid reading with emotion, and they'll just, like, kind of, like, just go through it. And so I think for the next book I choose, I want to keep them at ones that have that kind of stuff, so that when we do sit down and go through it, we're going to, like, start looking at the characters and their feelings and how they say things and how we read them. So that would be one thing that we would try with those students that struggle with it.
So choosing books with a lot of inflection, making sure it has dialogue in which they have to use that inflection component when they're reading. That's important to see. How about the question marks? What would you do about that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean...
So do you think maybe you could infuse it into your guided reading lesson as a word workstation?
Yeah, I could.
So how would you do? How would you envision that?
Let me think about it. I guess... I mean, this is the way I'm seeing it. I might be wrong, but, like, giving them, like, dialogue to, like, correct and, like, add, like, the quotations and the questions or exclamation marks kind of thing. So that's something I could start with.
That's perfect. And you could even make it, you like to make things more fun and hip for your kids, so you could make it like funky sayings that they say all the time, and then they'd have to add the punctuation. I love that. They would totally get it, and then they can make their own up, and then add what punctuation goes at the end of that.
Yeah, this would be a good thing to do too, because the next unit is characters and feelings. So
that's perfect. And you could use that even with your inflection kids. If you're making statements and they have to have an exclamation point or a question, how do you use an inflected ending when you're asking a question versus when you have an exclamation point?
I'm going to over-dramatize all next week when I say stuff.
Perfect. See? It's perfect.
What are you doing?
Good morning. That's great. I love the way that your groups travel throughout your room. They really, you can tell you've been doing at least the groups for a while, if not the guided reading station, because that's what you said, you haven't done it for that long. But your groups are extremely fluid, and your kids are really well behaved. They're really well behaved. I noticed you were a little bit worried about one or two that were off task, but that's not what anyone is looking at. I mean, it was amazing how quiet they were. They all knew where they were going next. Not anybody was lost. You and I spoke earlier about workstations and trying to create more rigorous ones due to our student population. What do you think you could do to some of your workstations today to create them more rigorous? And you can just
today they were like not as rigorous as they normally would be. I think it was just because this week was like super like all over the place. So I was like, we gotta. And then today I was like nervous because I was like gonna be observed. So I was like, I need you guys to like do things that are like super chill, super good, you know. But like, but usually they are like, I'll try to do. On Fridays are a little bit more fun for them, like things that they do. But like like the word searches like never happen. Usually that's the spelling, but we already took our test, so I was like, there's no point in trying like practicing our spelling words again. So for the most part, like those ones, like they'll be like, use your spelling words in sentences, and I'll have all the words out. Or some of them, I'll ask them to just spell them out with Play-Doh, and so they'll do like different fun stuff for their spelling at that station usually. So that one's usually different. I just was like, we already did it, so here's what you're doing now. But I think that they're starting to become more rigorous besides like what was going on in there today. But they what I've been doing on iReady too is like choosing things like specific to their levels. Like I'll go in and it'll be like they struggle with like AO or OA and like different vowel sounds, OA and like OI and stuff. So I'll assign those to them. And then I have some students that like, I mean, this is math, but I'll have some students that are doing like fractions already and we haven't even gotten to it. So I'll assign that to them. So I kind of just, I'm trying to do things in like where it's options, where it's like, this is your level or this is your level. So like, and they're getting better at like choosing things to them. I notice like, because I've been saying to them a lot lately, like challenge yourself. Like you should really be doing things that like aren't too hard, but they like really like push you, you know? And so it's like, and I'm trusting you to make that decision for yourself. Like if I'm busy, like, and you know, like if something is too easy for you and you shouldn't be doing it. And they're like, so most of them are starting to get that, but sometimes they're like, right? Sometimes they're like,
easy
one. I'm gonna read this book. It's like,
well, I really don't have a lot more questions. I'm really proud of what you're doing. I see your focus is going to be on creating that rigor in those workstations. That's really going to be your big focus. And maybe looking at some of those Jan Richardson strategies to implement into that station. I love the way that you're finding where those kids need to be and what you need to focus on. So do you have any questions for me or any need for clarification or anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jenna.
All right. Thanks.